Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into my updated college basketball bubble watch 2.0. We have entered March. It is March 1st, and probably tonight, possibly tomorrow, but probably tonight at around 7 o'clock, I will be going live and filling out a bracket and just talking to you guys and going over some things. So look for that either tonight or tomorrow, but definitely going to be more live streams surrounding March Madness and just in general here as we enter March. When it comes to the full bubble breakdown, this is probably the best thing to look at in terms of it. So if you look on the far right side, that is the percent chance to get a bid. You can see the 8 seeds. At this point, Gonzaga, I mean, they're loved analytically, so they're going to be very likely in the tournament just based off of analytics. Obviously, some people think they're one of the first teams out, one of the last teams in. They have a really good record, but they are in a very bad conference. They've got a huge game with St. Mary's. If they win that, they're guaranteed to be in, so we will see. And then also, Gonzaga could face St. Mary's pretty much back-to-back because of the way the West Coast Conference tournament works, with it being very small. Gonzaga might face St. Mary's, then have like one game and then face St. Mary's again. So it's going to be, if Gonzaga splits with St. Mary's within like the next 2.5 weeks, end of the regular season and the conference tournament, I think they're going to be in. If they lose both games, they possibly could be out. But analytically, they are loved. You can see at some of the 8 seeds, these teams all still have over an 80% chance to make the tournament. TCU, or excuse me, these are 9 seeds. TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma. And then Wake Forest is another one. Analytically, they're liked a lot more than the, bracketologists, the people that do the bubble. Wake Forest right now kind of on the verge of being in, but analytically at least they've got an 82% chance. Looking at the 10 seeds, it's Utah State, Nebraska coming off that loss last night to Ohio State. People talk about Ohio State possibly being on the bubble. I think with Ohio State, they're going to have to beat Michigan. They're going to have to beat Rutgers on the road. And then they're going to have to win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. And then they probably get one of the last 4 spots as an 11 seed. Maybe not. You do have St. John's. Yeah, St. John's is another team. Analytically, they're liked a lot more. Colorado State in as well. And then the teams surely on the bubble right now, Villanova. They are in the tournament, at least in this scenario, although it's very close, 69% chance. Indiana State also 55% chance. What if Indiana State goes to the Missouri Valley Conference Championship, they get all the way there, and then they lose by 1 point? Do they get an at-large bid as an 11 seed? Maybe in the play-in game, it's possible. Florida Atlantic last 4 in around a 66% chance. New Mexico, Seton Hall, and Virginia also in at around 63% chance for a lot of those teams. Looking at the first teams out right now, Colorado, their bid chance basically 50-50. You also do have Providence sitting at around a 38% chance. Utah, Pittsburgh, Kansas State about a 1 in 5 chance. Cincinnati down there, Iowa, Drake, and then Ohio State sitting at a 10% chance, with Butler all the way down at a 3% chance. They're probably going to have to somehow win the Big East Conference tournament. And then also other teams, if you want to include these teams, I mean, these would be teams that would be in an expanded field. If we expanded it to 96, possibly over 100, UNLV, Oregon, Memphis, SMU, Syracuse, all right around 3% chance, 2%. Virginia Tech, Richmond. Wow, they really dislike Richmond in these analytics, don't they? Richmond all the way down at a 1% chance. Appalachian State obviously should win their conference tournament. That's why they're expected to be in as a 13 seed. A&M really fell off out of the SEC. They came into the season ranked inside of the top 25. Ole Miss really fell off after like a 13-0 start. You do have NC State, Minnesota, Bradley, San Francisco, and then VCU as well. And then taking a look at the actual bracket matrix. So this is out of a total of 109 overall brackets. That's the most important thing to look at when it comes to the bubble, at least in terms of this scenario. You can see, at least according to the bracket matrix, New Mexico is in virtually every single bracket. Virginia's in every single bracket. Seton Hall is in basically every single bracket. So is Wake Forest. Now, the question with Wake Forest, they just had a big win and they followed it up with a big loss. I don't know if a lot of these brackets have been updated since their loss, because they beat Duke and basically everyone had them in the tournament. I still think they're in at this point, even after a bad loss, but it's going to be close. They're probably going to be one of the last four in at this point. Providence also in like 95% of the brackets. Gonzaga in basically 97% of the brackets. Indiana State, obviously, either as an at-large or an auto bid, possibly winning the Missouri Valley. And then Richmond, you can see it drops way off with Richmond, 58 brackets, about half. Moving on to the other at-larges, other teams on the bubble. Colorado, 32 brackets they're appearing in. Villanova at 17. Utah, St. John's, if you like analytics. Texas A&M getting some love, but really just 10% of the brackets. Ole Miss, Butler appearing in 3 brackets. Drake appearing in 3 brackets, along with Pittsburgh and Syracuse. Very, very unlikely those teams make it at this point. Just looking at a few end of the season schedules, this is Wake Forest. So Wake Forest, that's a huge game at Virginia Tech. If they beat Virginia Tech, you've got home games against Georgia Tech where you're around 14-point favorites. Also Clemson. You likely go 2-1 in this scenario with a win, over Clemson. You're in. If you go 1-2, it's going to be real dicey. You're going to need a big performance in your conference tournament, but obviously you cannot lose to Georgia Tech. The loss to Notre Dame, certainly crippling for Wake Forest considering they're on the bubble. Looking at Gonzaga, you can see just one game remaining. It is on the road at St. Mary's. They lost to St. Mary's at home by 2 points. They're sitting around +5. It is winnable, but St. Mary's has been crushing everyone. At this point, St. Mary's moving up seed lines, even though, they're in a bad conference. They've beaten a lot of bad teams. Their dominance has been impressive. And then moving on to another analytical system, you can see Wake Forest here in as a 10 seed, the final 10 seed. Colorado just in. Indiana State sneaks in as well. You do also have Utah, Providence, St. John's, and Pittsburgh playing in the first 4. Teams just missing out: Seton Hall, New Mexico, Villanova, Syracuse, Iowa, Kansas State, Ole Miss, and then Butler gets a shout out there as well. Looking at Joe Lunardi's updated bubble from a few days ago, the last 4 byes: FAU, Nevada, Wake Forest, and Virginia. The last 4 in New Mexico: Gonzaga, Seton Hall, and Providence. I would say Seton Hall right now is literally 50-50 depending on who you look at. Same with Colorado. First 4 out: Villanova, Utah, Colorado, and St. John's. And then the next 4 out: A&M, Iowa, Ole Miss, and Kansas State. So teams that are within shouting distance right now, seemingly. Possibly Iowa. Iowa, would definitely be above Ohio State based on their resume and their record in terms of the Big Ten. Ole Miss also kind of has a shot, although I think Ole Miss, just in general, had kind of a fraudulent start anyways. St. John's, they won 3 games in a row. They already had the analytics. Now they're backing that up with the wins. It'll be interesting to see what they do, possibly in their conference tournament, playing at Madison Square Garden. But in general, that is the updated bubble. And then you also had the other thing come out about the Big 12 and the way they've manipulated the net and all the analytical systems. And when it comes to something like that, the reason analytics can be I'm not exactly sure how the net is calculated, but analytics in general, I'm going to say something and people probably aren't going to understand this, but if you look at a team, let's just say Iowa State, and I'm not hating on Iowa State. Iowa State could go to the Final Four, I don't know. But technically, analytically, because it's based on dominance, Iowa State beating a team like Green Bay 87-45 with an average margin of +20 during the game is better than Iowa State beating Kansas by 3 points at home in a game that they're trailing throughout. Analytically, I know you would say, well, how is beating Green Bay better than beating Kansas? It's based off of a dominance factor within the game. So what people are saying is Big 12 teams have scheduled a lot of really horrible teams, like outside of the top 300 in terms of rankings analytically, and they're just beating up on them. And in turn, that overvalues their analytics significantly, all of the teams. So then when they get into conference play, the team that loses will not be penalized. It's kind of like the SEC with ESPN, FPI always ranking SEC teams really high. So because FPI is based partly on talent. And that's why teams like Texas A&M and Florida are always overrated in college football in terms of analytics, because those teams are just not nearly as good as the talent that they have. And the problem is when a team like, let's just say Georgia beats A&M analytically, A&M doesn't get punished for that because Georgia is really good, but A&M is already overinflated in terms of the analytical rankings anyways. So these teams, in terms of non-conference, they'll schedule a few big games, but overall, they're not scheduling any tough mid-majors. They're scheduling really bad mid-majors, and there's a high emphasis on destroying the really bad mid-majors, winning by a margin, not only winning by 30, but it's the dominance factor during the game, because the analytics are also calculated based on how much are you leading by. Obviously the context to it. You could win a game by 20 points, but if you're leading it by 1 point throughout and then go on a ridiculously crazy run at the end of the game, that's going to tell the story to where, okay, you really didn't win this game by 20 points. It was a lot closer, or you just kind of blew them out late, as opposed to being up by 32 early in the second half, pulling all your starters, and then only winning by 17. Right? So the analytics are trying to tell the full context, but in doing that, it's actually devaluing really good wins if you can up the dominance factor against really horrible teams, and that's how you get game scores of 100 on T-Rank and things like that. So it is real interesting what's going on. I'm not sure how the net is calculated in comparison to T-Rank, but that's how T-Rank does it. It's a dominance factor. It's not that you don't get rewarded for beating a team like Kansas, but if you're on the road at Kansas and you're down by 8 points most of the game and then you win by 1, you're not going to get a game score of 100. As opposed to if you beat Green Bay by 50 points at home and you're leading by 30 throughout the entire game, you're very likely going to get a game score of 100. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.